Tariq Melrose here, and if today's news cycle were a meal, it'd be fast food. Cheap, greasy, and somehow leaves you hungry for substance. But don't worry, I've prepared a full-course breakdown with a side of sanity. We've got confusion, contradiction, and just enough denial to fuel a sequel. Subscribe if you haven't. This ride's only going to get bumpier, and if you're wondering whether our leaders actually believe in what they're saying, so am I. Stick around. We're just getting warmed up. When a Trump official dodges simple questions on free speech rights and openly shrugs off Supreme Court orders, democracy is in danger. Stay tuned, because in this video, we're breaking down the GOP's authoritarian playbook and why it's a direct threat to America's freedoms.
Into that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Murphy.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, AI is an enormous growing industry critical to the future economic health of the country. We have had the benefit over the years of the top talent in AI, researchers, students coming to the United States to help us grow that industry. But for the first time in the last 15 years, there are more top talented individuals and workers in AI leaving the country than coming here. And the reason is pretty simple. People who are coming here to work from overseas through the visa program are very uncertain about what their rights are. And that is because of the actions this administration has taken. So I think it's important to get on the record for those individuals who are here currently and those thinking of coming to the United States to work or to study to understand what their rights are. So let me ask you a series of pretty simple questions. Probably the key of right amongst the 5 freedoms is the right to free speech, the right to express your own personal opinion about politics, culture, the economy. Do you believe that you have the right to detain or deport a U.S. citizen for simply expressing their political opinion, a U.S. citizen?
No.
No. Do you believe that you have the right to detain or deport a legal permanent resident for expressing their political opinion?
I don't make decisions on legal status here in the United States. The Department of State does that, and I would say that as they've gone through an evaluation of who gets a visa, who gets legal status, green cards, they've been evaluating and discussing how that applies to people
I acknowledge
that
you don't. I acknowledge you don't make. Right. But if someone is a legal permanent resident of the United States, I'm not talking about an H-1B or a student visa holder. I'm talking about a legal permanent resident. If you are a legal permanent resident, do you have the right to detain or deport that person simply for expressing their political opinion?
The Department of State makes those decisions.
No,
and the
they
Department
don't.
of Homeland Security.
You make that decision about who you have the right to detain or deport. So you are involved in that. Do you believe the United States, do you believe the law allows?
The Department of Homeland Security under the Trump administration is enforcing the law, following the constitutional rights of folks who are here as citizens, those who are here legally, and those who are here illegally.
So a legal permanent resident is by definition here legally. Do you believe, I mean, I think this is really troubling if you can't answer this simple question. Do you believe that the U.S. government can detain and deport a legal permanent resident for expressing a political opinion that the administration disagrees with?
The determination you're asking for is based on things that you are determining that the Secretary of State has considered and evaluated. We don't evaluate that, the administration, along with a partnership with the Department of State, on what is political speech and what's an affiliation with a foreign terrorist organization.
Do you believe?
That's the difference between the two that you're asking.
That you can detain and deport a legal permanent resident for expressing a political opinion?
We have not detained we have not deported anybody who's a legal permanent resident or a citizen of the United States.
Then say you don't have the ability to do that.
We have
clarify that for the
true.
Millions of.
That is exactly what I'm doing, is that we have followed exactly what the law is, and that we have not detained or deported anybody who's a citizen or has legal status in this country. We are focused on the worst of the worst dangerous criminals.
You do not believe you have
to get them out of the country.
You do not believe you have the ability to do that.
We have not done that at all, and the Trump administration has no plans.
Well, just because you haven't done it doesn't mean that you won't do it in the future.
We are following
do you believe you have the ability to do that or not?
That we are doing.
I think you were going to.
The exact appropriate thing in partnership with the Department of State and in partnership with the Trump administration.
Have you read I assume you have read the Supreme Court decision in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia?
Yes.
That court decision requires the administration to facilitate Kilmar Abrego Garcia's release from El Salvador. Can you describe the steps that you have taken to facilitate this release? And specifically, can you answer as to whether you have reached out to your counterpart in El Salvador to facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's release?
Abrego Garcia is a citizen of El Salvador and should never have been in this country and will not be coming back to this country. There is no scenario where Abrego Garcia will be in the United States again. If he were to come back, we would immediately deport him again because he is a terrorist, he's a human smuggler, and he is a wife beater.
You've read the Supreme Court decision. Does the Supreme Court decision not require you to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia?
The Trump administration is complying with all court orders and judges' orders.
Does the Supreme Court order require you to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia?
Is a citizen of El Salvador. It is up to the president of the El Salvador to make the decision.
You're a defendant
on
in
if
the
he
case.
is coming back. It's been a big topic of conversation between all of us, between the country. When the president visited the United States of America, it was discussed and talked about there. The president has been very clear on this issue, as the Secretary of State and I have as well. Abrego Garcia is not a citizen of this country and is a dangerous individual who does not belong here.
I will not ask another question, Madam Chair.
But the discussion, we would immediately
But the discussion ends when the Supreme Court rules 9-0 that you have to facilitate his release. And the fact that you can't even acknowledge the wording of the order, which commands you to facilitate his release, and you advertise to this committee that you are going to willfully ignore the ruling, and that is incredibly chilling for the balance of powers in a democracy that relies on the executive branch to honor decisions made by the highest court of the land.
What you just heard in that exchange is the kind of authoritarian double talk that should set off alarm bells for anyone who still believes in the Constitution, the rule of law, and basic democratic norms. This wasn't just some policy disagreement. This was a Trump-era DHS official openly dodging direct questions about whether they believe the government has the power to detain or deport legal permanent residents simply for expressing political opinions. Let's be clear. Congressman Murphy's line of questioning wasn't complicated. He wasn't asking for a classified briefing or a detailed operational breakdown. He was asking for the most basic of affirmations, that in the United States, you cannot be deported for speaking your mind if you are here legally. It should take 2 seconds to answer, no, we cannot and will not. That's it. End of story. Instead, we got a masterclass in bureaucratic evasion, passing the buck to the State Department, hiding behind vague partnerships with other agencies, and repeatedly refusing to say on the record that this administration does not have and does not believe it has the authority to silence lawful residents for their political speech. Why? Because this is exactly the kind of power the authoritarian right dreams about having in their back pocket. And here's the danger. Just because they say, we haven't done it yet, doesn't mean they won't. The refusal to draw a hard line today leaves the door wide open for abuse tomorrow. That's how authoritarian creep works. You leave the answer fuzzy, you keep your options open, and you normalize the idea that dissent could one day be a deportable offense. That's not democracy. That's the stuff of dictatorships. But the rot goes deeper. Murphy then raised the Supreme Court's ruling in the case of Kilmargo Garcia, a decision that explicitly required the administration to facilitate Garcia's release from El Salvador. Whether you agree with Garcia or not, the legal reality is undeniable. The Supreme Court issued an order. In our system of government, the executive branch must comply. There is no asterisk. There is no only if we feel like it. And what did the Trump-aligned DHS official say? They flat out refused to commit to honoring it. They doubled down, labeling Garcia a terrorist, a human smuggler, and a wife beater, while conveniently sidestepping the fact that none of that gives them the legal right to ignore a Supreme Court mandate. The official didn't just duck the question.
they all but announced that they're willing to openly defy the highest court in the land. This is what authoritarianism in America looks like in practice. It's not always jackboots on the street. Sometimes it's a calm, measured voice at a congressional hearing, explaining that the executive branch will partner with whoever it wants, interpret the law however it wants, and selectively follow court orders based on political convenience. And here's the hypocrisy. Republicans never miss a chance to lecture about law and order when it's about cracking down on immigrants, Black protesters, or women's reproductive rights. But when they are told by the Supreme Court to follow the law, suddenly it's optional. Suddenly it's complicated. Suddenly, the president of El Salvador's opinion somehow matters more than the United States' own judicial branch. That's not protecting America. That's dismantling the very checks and balances that keep us from sliding into authoritarian rule. Because once you normalize ignoring Supreme Court orders you don't like, you've destroyed the foundation of the legal system. And if they can get away with ignoring court orders on immigration, what's to stop them from ignoring them on voting rights, or reproductive rights, or freedom of the press? Democrats in that hearing were doing exactly what they're supposed to do, pressing for clear answers, forcing these officials to go on record, and exposing the dangerous mindset that runs through the Trump Republican approach to governance. It's not about upholding the law. It's about bending the law into a weapon for political ends. This is why elections matter. This is why having a functioning, reality-based administration matters. Because under Trump and his enablers, the machinery of government isn't being used to protect the public. It's being weaponized against anyone who doesn't fit their ideology, whether that's immigrants, journalists, political opponents, or just ordinary Americans who dare to speak up. If you care about free speech, if you care about the rule of law, if you care about living in a country where court orders are binding and not just suggestions, you cannot sit on the sidelines. Authoritarianism doesn't happen in one big dramatic moment. It creeps in through hearings like this, where a government official calmly refuses to give a straight answer about whether dissent is a deportable offense and casually hints that they'll ignore the Supreme Court if it suits them. This has been Tariq Melrose Vlogs, where we call out the lies, expose the hypocrisy, and fight for a democracy that actually works for everyone. If you believe in protecting free speech, defending the rule of law, and holding power accountable, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe. Because the fight against authoritarianism doesn't end when the hearing adjourns. It starts right here, with all of us refusing to let this slide.